Okay, so what if I told you that a sweet little novel about life in a 19th century English village and like a super dense kind of out there text supposedly channeled from, get this, a sixth density social memory complex could actually
Yeah.
like talk to each other.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, right? But that's what we're going to try to do today. You, our amazing listeners, sent in these totally different sources, Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford and The Law of One.
Really different.
And we're going to see if there's any like unexpected connections when we look at them side by side.
I love that. It's a cool challenge. We've got this down-to-earth picture of life in Cranford, all about relationships and small town stuff. And then, bam, this huge cosmic narrative in The Law of One about, like, the whole nature of reality.
It's a lot, right? So first up, Cranford.
Okay, Cranford.
Picture this. A quiet English village. Life is slow. People visit each other. They're kind to each other. They gossip a little, typical small town life. The parts you guys sent in really capture that. So it's all about everyday things. Illness, people dying, social rules, and all the little quirks that make the characters so fun.
I love the characters in Cranford.
Me too. We've got Miss Pole. She always knows what's going on. Miss Jessie Brown. She's so kind. Captain Brown, very steady. Then there's Miss Maddie. She's sweet, but she gets flustered easily.
Oh, Miss Maddie.
And Miss Jenkins, she's got opinions, let me tell you. And then there's Mr. Holbrook. He's surprisingly smart, actually. And, of course, Mrs. Jameson, she's like the big deal in town.
The queen bee.
Exactly. Lady Glenmire, very independent. And Peter Jenkins, bit of a troublemaker. It's just so relatable, Like, we all know people like this.
It's very human.
Okay, now get ready for a total shift. Our other source, The Law of One, it's supposedly channeled from this being called Ra. And it goes from this tiny village to or the entire universe. We're talking big questions here.
Yeah.
Consciousness, spiritual evolution, and this idea that everything is connected, all is one.
Big shift.
Huge shift. And the stuff you sent, it goes deep into some pretty wild ideas. UFOs, aliens, levels of consciousness called densities, like different planes of existence.
Cities, yeah.
And healing, the history of Earth, all kinds of spiritual stuff. The key players are Ra, obviously, and then there's the Confederation of Planets. They're all about helping others. Then you've got the Orion group. They're more about serving themselves.
Like the opposite.
Exactly. And there are wanderers, these souls that come to Earth to help us. And then this idea of a harvest based on how spiritually advanced you are. Energy centers, the veiling process, which is like forgetting past lives so you can learn in this one. I mean, it's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah.
So what we're going to do, what we're going to try to do, is find connections between these two worlds. Can what happens in Cranford tell us anything about the big picture in The Law of One? Can The Law of One make us see Miss Maddie and her friends in a new light? We're looking for those little insights, how people deal with life, whether it's a small village or the whole universe.
That's the big question. What happens when we put tiny Cranford next to giant Law of One?
I love it. Okay, so let's start with something everyone deals with. Illness and loss.
Okay.
In Cranford, we see Miss Brown. She's sick, and it's really bad, incurable. The excerpts show her pain, how it affects her, how she feels guilty because she needs help.
It's really hard on everyone.
Oh, yeah. And her sister, Miss Jessie, she takes care of her with so much love. And her dad, Captain Brown, he's so tender with her. And then there's this line from Miss Jessie. It gets me every time. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. It is. But then Miss Brown dies, and even after, it's hard for Miss Jessie. She loses her house because of all the expenses. It really hits you how loss just keeps affecting people.
The ripple effects.
Now, The Law of One has a completely different take on this whole thing. Ra talks about this benignant domain of illness and death. It's like they're part of the plan for our souls,
Not something we usually think about when we're grieving.
I know, right? Benignant domain while you're watching Miss Jessie struggle. It's tough to reconcile.
But in that framework, challenges are like opportunities for growth. Ra says healing is a choice. It comes from your mind, body, and spirit. And death isn't the end. It's just moving on, dropping the veil. So Cranford shows us the pain, the human side, and The Law of One tries to give it this cosmic meaning.
It's almost like they're talking about different universes. But maybe, just maybe, what we see in Cranford is how this bigger cosmic plan plays out in real life, with real emotions.
Interesting. So let's move on to something else. Social stuff like hierarchies and how people act around each other.
Okay, social dynamics. Cranford nails this. It's all about how people behave in this little world. Social rules are everything. When someone new comes to town, like Mrs. Jameson or Lady Glenmire, everyone reacts. Even Miss Maddie, who's so sweet, She gets worried about being proper, and Peter's jokes shock her.
I love how Gaskell captures that.
And when Mrs. Jameson throws a party, it's like this whole social drama unfolds. Everyone's anxious, everyone wants to be included. It shows how, even in a small, quiet place, these social things really matter.
It's like a little microcosm of society. Now, in the Law of One, we get this whole other level of social structure, cosmic groups. There's the Confederation, all about helping, and the Orion group, they're all about serving themselves. And guess what? Even the Orion group has its own pecking order. Like, some are more powerful than others.
So everyone's got a hierarchy.
It seems like it. And then there's this idea that Earth is quarantined by the Confederation, and these cosmic groups have different plans for us for how we evolve. It's like this big cosmic power struggle going on, totally different from the Tea Parties in Cranford, but kind of the same in a way.
I see what you mean. It's like in Cranford, it matters who's important, who has the most influence, and maybe, just maybe, that reflects these bigger cosmic forces at work.
Could be. Now let's think about how these sources deal with beliefs and perception.
Okay, beliefs. Well, in Cranford, when those robberies happen, everyone freaks out. There's this panic, rumors are flying, and people are scared. Miss Maddie starts patrolling with a poker and a brush and a shovel, like she's going to war. It's funny, but it shows how scared they are.
A little bit of paranoia.
Totally. And then there's Senor Bernoni. Everyone's suspicious of him, and then it turns out he's actually Samuel Brown, a local boy. It's like they see this mysterious stranger, and they make up all these stories about him.
Jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. Even Miss Pole, who's usually pretty level-headed, she gets caught up in it. And Lady Glenmeyer, she's the only one who's like, wait a minute, let's be realistic. It shows how we create our own realities based on what we see and what we hear, even if it's not the whole truth.
Cranford is a great example of that. Now, the Law of One takes a different approach. Ross says our reality, this third density, it's basically an illusion.
An illusion.
Yeah. And we're stuck in this idea of cause and effect. We see something happen, we think we know why, but Ross says our reality is just what we create with our minds. Kind of like in Cranford, where the townspeople created this whole drama around Signor Brunoni based on their own fears.
So we're all living in our own little illusions.
Maybe. And then there's this veiling process. We forget our past lives, which means we're seeing the world with blinders on. It's like we can't see the bigger picture.
So it's not just Miss Maddie and her friends making things up in their heads. It's all of us, all the time.
Possibly. The Law of One suggests that we're all navigating a much bigger illusion, something we can't even fully grasp.
Okay, so we're all a little delusional. But you know what I love about Cranford? The characters, they're all so quirky. Captain Brown with his old wig and coat like he's still young. Miss Jessie, she sings off-key and dresses like a teenager, but she's so full of life.
I know. And Mr. Holbrook, everyone thinks he's just a boring farmer, but then he starts quoting poetry.
I love that part. And Miss Maddie, she's got this secret crush on Mr. Holbrook, and she wants fancy caps like Mrs. Jameson. And Peter, he's always playing pranks. He's like a mischievous little kid. It's like Gaskell is showing us that even in this proper little town, people are complicated and interesting.
It's the little details that bring them to life. Now, how does this connect to the Law of One? Well, Ra talks about us as mind-body-spirit complexes, and each one is unique. We have our own experiences, our own biases, our own catalysts. It's like what makes us who we are. And then there are these wanderers, these advanced beings who come to Earth and forget who they really are.
So, like Signor Brunoni, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. It's like you can't judge a book by its cover. Even in Cranford, they thought they knew everyone, but there were all these hidden depths. And the Law of One says, hey, maybe everyone, everywhere, has something going on beneath the surface.
So whether it's a funny old captain or a cosmic traveler in disguise, there's always more to people than we see.
Okay.
Okay, last thing. Let's talk about this. Finding meaning and connection.
Okay.
In Cranford, there's this scene where Miss Maddie gets a new silk gown. It's just a dress, but she's so happy. It's like this little thing makes her life feel brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And when Peter comes home, everyone's excited. They missed him. And even after Jessie gets married and moves away, she still wants to be part of the community. It's like human connection. It really matters.
It makes life richer. Now, the Law of One takes a different angle. Ross says we all want to grow and we want to understand love. That's what we're really searching for. And Ross says, hey, you can find that in meditation, in connecting with the Creator.
So it's like Cranford is about finding meaning in your little world with the people around you. And the Law of One is about connecting with something much bigger, with love itself.
It's like zooming out, going from the specific to the universal. But maybe they're both saying the same thing, that we all crave connection, whether it's with our friends or with the universe.
I like that. So we've gone from this tiny, charming world of Cranford to the massive cosmic world of a law of one. And maybe, just maybe, they're not so different after all.
Maybe they both tell us something about being human.
So, here's a question for you guys listening. After hearing all this, how do you see your own life? The stuff you go through, the people you know, does it feel different? Could there be some cosmic meaning hidden in your everyday life? What about those social things, those little hierarchies in your own world? Are they connected to something bigger? And what about you? What are you searching for? What kind of connection are you looking for?
Here's another question. If those ladies in Cranford are searching for meaning in their little village, and Ross is talking about this universal quest for love, are they both talking about the same thing, just on different scales?
It's something to think about. Go back and look at Cranford, look at the Law of One. Maybe you'll see them in a whole new way. And hey, maybe check out some other books, other ideas that bridge the gap between the personal and the universal. Thanks for going on this deep dive with us.
Thanks for listening.